36F Season's greetings from the Wilsons, Mark, Jennifer, Emma, and Liam. The Christmas card that revealed my husband had another wife and children 800 miles away. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but when your entire reality shatters one random Tuesday in December, I suppose sharing the story with strangers on the internet makes as much sense as anything else. It started with a Christmas card. Such an innocent, festive thing. Red envelope, gold embossed lettering, the kind that fills mailboxes this time of year. I barely glanced at it as I sorted through bills and advertisements, tossing it onto the counter with other holiday greetings to open later. That evening, with a glass of wine and Christmas music playing softly, I settled in to read through the cards from distant relatives and old friends. I didn't immediately notice anything unusual about the red envelope addressed to the Wilson family at our address. We are indeed the Wilsons, Mark and Rebecca, living at 1432 Maple Street. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a glossy photo card. For one suspended moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. There was my husband Mark, smiling broadly with his arm around a blonde woman I had never seen before. Standing in front of them were two children, a girl about 10 and a boy around 7. Season's greetings from the Wilsons, Mark, Jennifer, Emma, and Liam. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I stared at the unfamiliar woman and children, then back at my husband's face, the same face that had kissed me goodbye 3 days earlier before leaving for what he'd described as a regional sales conference in Minneapolis. The same face that had promised to call every night, who had texted me just that morning complaining about boring presentations and mediocre hotel coffee. The photo showed them posed in front of a fireplace, wearing coordinating outfits of burgundy and navy, a professionally taken family portrait. A happy family, a complete family. A family that couldn't possibly exist. I flipped the envelope over, checking the return address. J. Wilson, 247 Oak Ridge Lane, Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati, 800 miles from our home in Boston. 800 miles and apparently another life entirely. With shaking hands, I examined the photo more closely. The boy, Liam, had Mark's distinctive cleft chin and cowlick. The girl had his eyes. The woman, Jennifer, was leaning comfortably into his embrace in the natural way of someone accustomed to being held by him. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. It was a Christmas card that had accidentally been sent to the wrong address. Not the wrong recipient, just the wrong version of the Wilson family at our address. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Mark. Conference dinner running late. We'll call before bed. Love you. I stared at those 3 final words, wondering what they possibly could mean to a man who apparently had 2 families. Mark and I met 9 years ago at a friend's destination wedding in the Bahamas. He was charming, attentive, and lived in Boston like me. A coincidence that felt like fate at the time. Our relationship progressed with reassuring predictability. Dating exclusively after 3 months, moving in together after a year, engaged at 2 years, married at 3. Mark worked in pharmaceutical sales, a job that required regular travel, usually 2 or 3 days each week visiting hospitals and medical centers throughout the Northeast. The travel had been part of his life since before we met, so I never questioned it. In fact, I'd grown to appreciate the rhythm, intense togetherness when he was home, independent time for my own projects and friendships when he was away. It seemed like the perfect balance. We had discussed having children several times. Mark always expressed hesitation, citing his travel schedule and our busy lives in the city. Maybe next year had become a familiar refrain, one I'd grown increasingly frustrated with as I approached my mid-30s. But I believed we had time, that he would eventually be ready. Our relationship wasn't perfect. Whose is? But it was solid. At least I thought it was. We rarely argued, enjoyed the same books and TV shows, traveled well together, and still had what I considered a satisfying physical relationship, despite nearly 6 years of marriage. Friends often commented on how in sync we seemed, how we complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses. Mark called me every night when he traveled, without fail. We texted throughout the day, nothing deep, just check-ins and occasional inside jokes. He shared hotel room photos, complaints about flight delays, anecdotes about awkward client meetings, all the mundane details that made his business trips feel transparent and integrated into our shared life. But now, staring at the Christmas card in my trembling hands, I realized those details might have been carefully curated breadcrumbs, designed to create the illusion of openness while concealing a massive deception. How long had this been going on? The children provided some timeline. If the boy was around 7, this relationship must have predated our meeting in the Bahamas. Had Mark been with Jennifer the entire time I'd known him? Was our entire relationship built on a foundation of lies? Memories began to recalibrate, details shifting into sinister new patterns. The regional sales conferences that always lasted 3 or 4 days, the occasional week-long training sessions that happened every few months, his insistence on handling our finances, the way he never invited colleagues to our home, his reluctance to appear in photos I posted on social media. I thought about the calendar on Mark's phone, meticulously maintained with color-coded entries for different clients and regions. Had those been a sophisticated system for managing 2 completely separate lives? The thought made me physically ill. But beyond the practical questions of how he'd maintained this deception was the more devastating question of why. Why create 2 full, separate lives instead of choosing one? What could possibly motivate someone to sustain such an elaborate fraud for what appeared to be at least a decade? And most painfully, which life was real? Which woman was he truly coming home to? And which was the side relationship? Had I always been the other woman without knowing it? My first instinct was to call Mark immediately, to scream and demand explanations. But some deeper instinct for self-preservation held me back. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before confronting him. If he had maintained this level of deception for years, a direct confrontation would only give him time to construct more lies, to secure whatever evidence might exist, to warn Jennifer before I could discover the full extent of his betrayal. I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop. With the Christmas card propped against the screen, I began to search. Finding Jennifer Wilson of Cincinnati proved surprisingly easy. Her Facebook profile was public, filled with photos of the children's activities, neighborhood gatherings, and family milestones. Mark appeared in many of them, always tagged as Mark Wilson. In Boston, in our life together, he used the Facebook account Mark Wilson Taylor, supposedly honoring his mother's maiden name. Another lie, I now realized. I scrolled through Jennifer's timeline, feeling increasingly detached from my body as I absorbed the evidence of this parallel life. There they were at Emma's dance recital 3 months ago, during Mark's pharmaceutical conference in Detroit. There was Liam's baseball team celebration in June, when Mark had told me he was visiting research hospitals in Chicago, family vacation at a lakeside cabin in August, his supposed sales training retreat in Arizona. The timestamps aligned perfectly with his business trips away from our home in Boston. He had constructed a schedule that allowed him to be fully present in both households, never raising suspicion in either. Jennifer's profile provided more devastating revelations. She and Mark had been married for 12 years, 3 years longer than I had known him. Their anniversary posts referenced meeting in college, building their first home together, starting their family. There was no indication she knew about me or suspected her husband had another wife. I found her Instagram next, which featured more intimate family moments. Mark teaching Liam to ride a bike, helping Emma with homework, family movie nights on their sectional couch. The most recent post from just 2 days ago showed their Christmas tree with presents already arranged beneath it. The caption read, "Missing my love during this business trip, but everything's ready for his return. Chuck 5 more sleeps, Chuck daddy comes home, Christmas with Wilsons." 5 more sleeps. That aligned with Mark's scheduled return to Boston in 5 days. The pieces were assembling into a monstrous puzzle. Mark wasn't just having an affair. He was living an entire second life, or more accurately, I was his second life, since his marriage to Jennifer predated ours by several years. Our marriage was likely legally invalid, making me not a wife, but an unwitting mistress in a 9-year deception. I moved from social media to public records, finding their marriage license, property records for the house on Oak Ridge Lane, birth certificates for both children confirming Mark as their father. Each discovery was another body blow, another confirmation that the life I thought I knew was an elaborately constructed fiction. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang, Mark calling as promised before bed. I let it go to voicemail, unable to trust myself to speak to him without revealing what I'd discovered. His message was the same as always, tired but affectionate, mentioning conference details, saying he missed me and would call in the morning. How many times had he made a similar call to Jennifer after speaking to me? Did he have scripts for each of us, careful notes about what details he'd shared with which wife to avoid inconsistencies? The level of calculation required was staggering. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I created a detailed timeline of Mark's travel over the past year, correlating his absences from Boston with his appearances in Cincinnati based on Jennifer's social media. The pattern was unmistakable. He had created a perfectly alternating schedule, typically spending 4 to 5 days in each city before traveling for business to the other family. By morning, numb from shock and lack of sleep, I reached out to the only person I could trust with something this devastating, my sister Kate, who lived an hour away. I sent her a photo of the Christmas card with a text that read simply, "I need you to come over, now. Don't call, I'll explain when you get here." She arrived 90 minutes later, having driven directly from dropping her kids at school. One look at my face told her something was catastrophically wrong. "What happened?" she asked, following me into the kitchen where the evidence of my night-long investigation was spread across the counter and table. Wordlessly, I handed her the Christmas card. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock as she processed what she was seeing. Is he married to another woman? Father to 2 children I knew nothing about? Living a complete double life in Cincinnati? Yes to all of the above, I confirmed, my voice sounding strangely calm even to my own ears. Kate sat heavily on a kitchen stool, staring at the photo. How is this even possible? I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, the social media profiles, the public records, the correlated travel schedule. Her shock evolved into cold fury as she grasped the magnitude of Mark's deception. "That calculating bastard," she whispered. 9 years of lying to your face. What are you going to do? It was the question I'd been grappling with all night. What does one do upon discovering their entire marriage is a sophisticated fraud? There was no playbook for this level of betrayal. "I need to know more before confronting him," I said. "I need to understand the full scope of this deception, and I hesitated, the idea still forming. "I think Jennifer deserves to know too, before Mark has a chance to spin this or disappear." Kate nodded slowly. "You need legal advice immediately, and possibly a private investigator to fill in any gaps. This isn't just infidelity, it's potentially criminal. Bigamy, fraud, who knows what else." She was right. This went beyond relationship betrayal into potentially illegal territory. Mark had signed legal documents, presumably had separate financial accounts, perhaps even different identification documents. The web of deception would have required systematic fraud to maintain. "I can't stay here," I realized suddenly. "He can't know I've discovered this until I have all the information and legal protection I need." "Pack a bag," Kate said firmly. "You're coming to stay with us. John and the kids are visiting his parents this weekend, so you'll have space to think and plan." As I packed essentials into a suitcase, I felt like I was preparing to flee my own life. In a way, I was. The life I thought I had, my marriage, my home, my understanding of the past 9 years, had evaporated the moment I opened that mistakenly delivered Christmas card. Before leaving, I carefully replaced everything exactly as it had been, taking only digital copies of the evidence I'd gathered. The Christmas card I returned to its envelope and positioned on the counter where it might plausibly have remained unopened. If Mark contacted neighbors or checked security cameras, it would appear I had simply gone to visit my sister, something I did regularly enough to avoid suspicion. As Kate drove us away from the home I shared with a husband I had never really known, I stared at my wedding ring. a simple platinum band that Mark had placed on my finger 6 years earlier, vowing to love and honor me, mere years after making identical promises to another woman. I twisted it off and dropped it into my purse, feeling both hollow and strangely liberated. Whatever happened next, the life I had lived until yesterday was over. I just didn't know yet what would replace it. In the relative safety of Kate's home, with her unwavering support and her husband's legal connections, I spent the next 2 days building a comprehensive case and consulting with professionals. John's college roommate Michael was now a family law attorney who agreed to meet with me immediately, recognizing the urgency and complexity of the situation. In my 20 years of practice, I've seen some elaborate deceptions, but this... Michael shook his head after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. The level of premeditation and sustained duplicity is exceptional. He confirmed what I had already suspected. My marriage was likely legally invalid since Mark was already married when we underwent our ceremony. This had significant implications for financial disentanglement, property rights, and potential legal remedies. The good news, if we can call anything in this situation good, Michael explained, is that being the unwitting party in a bigamous relationship actually provides you with some additional legal protections. Mark has committed multiple frauds here, which strengthens your position for a favorable financial settlement. With Michael's guidance, I hired a private investigator to fill in the remaining gaps in my understanding. Within 24 hours, they provided a preliminary report that expanded the already staggering scope of Mark's deception. Mark maintained separate bank accounts, credit cards, and even slightly different social security numbers, one digit off, likely a deliberate error on documentation. He owned properties in both cities, our Boston townhouse and the Cincinnati family home. His pharmaceutical sales job was real, but he had manipulated his territory and reporting structure to create the perfect cover for his dual lives. Most disturbingly, the investigator uncovered evidence suggesting Mark might have a third residence, an apartment in Chicago where he supposedly spent occasional layovers between his Boston and Cincinnati lives. Whether this represented yet another relationship or simply a transitional space remained unclear. As this information coalesced into a comprehensive picture of Mark's elaborate fraud, I had to make a decision about Jennifer. Did she deserve to know immediately, or should I wait until I had confronted Mark? After consulting with both Kate and Michael, I decided direct contact before confronting Mark was essential. If Jennifer and I coordinated our responses, Mark would have no opportunity to manipulate either narrative or conceal assets. Finding her direct contact information proved challenging, perhaps not surprising given Mark's careful compartmentalization. Finally, I decided the most unambiguous approach would be to call her workplace, which was listed on her LinkedIn profile. My heart pounded as the receptionist transferred my call. How do you tell someone that their entire family life is built on a foundation of lies? Jennifer Wilson speaking, she answered, her voice professional and pleasant. Jennifer, I began, my carefully prepared opening suddenly evaporating. My name is Rebecca Wilson. I believe we need to talk about Mark. A pause. Mark? My husband Mark? Is everything okay? Has something happened? The concern in her voice, genuine worry for someone she loved, made this even harder. He's physically fine, I assured her quickly, but I've discovered something that affects both of us deeply. I know this will sound impossible, but I've been married to Mark for 6 years. He's been living a complete double life between Boston and Cincinnati. The silence that followed seemed endless. When she finally spoke, her voice had transformed from concerned to coldly precise. This isn't a topic for a phone conversation. I need to see proof of these allegations. I agree completely, I said, relieved she hadn't simply hung up. I can email you everything I've gathered, or if you prefer, we could meet in person. Email me first, she said, providing an address not listed in any of her public profiles. If what you're saying has any legitimacy, we'll need to meet. Within an hour of sending my carefully organized evidence, including our marriage certificate, photos documenting our relationship, correlated timelines of Mark's business trips, and the fateful Christmas card that had exposed everything, Jennifer called back. Her voice was steady but underlying with cold fury. "I'm booking a flight to Boston for tomorrow. Text me your address. Don't tell Mark anything yet." The next 24 hours passed in a surreal haze of anticipation and dread. Mark continued his regular check-ins from Minneapolis, completely unaware that his carefully constructed dual life was collapsing. Each text felt like communication from a stranger, the familiar words and expressions now revealed as calculated performances. Jennifer arrived at Kate's house the following afternoon, having taken an early flight from Cincinnati. The moment she walked in, this woman I knew intimately through photos but had never met, the full bizarreness of our situation hit me with physical force. We were strangers connected by the most intimate betrayal imaginable. She looked exactly as she did in her photos, but more tired, the strain of the past 24 hours evident in the tightness around her eyes. We assessed each other cautiously, neither adversaries nor quite allies yet, but the only two people who could truly understand what the other was experiencing. "Thank you for coming," I said simply, "and I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." "How did you find out?" she asked, accepting the coffee Kate offered before discreetly leaving us alone. I showed her the Christmas card that had accidentally been sent to my address. "I addressed those myself," she said, examining the envelope, "but Mark took them to mail." She looked up, a flash of realization crossing her face. "He must have deliberately diverted this one. Maybe he wanted to get caught, or at least wanted you to know about us." It was a possibility I hadn't considered, that after nearly a decade of deception, Mark might have engineered this accident as a way to end the charade without directly confessing. For the next several hours, Jennifer and I compared experiences, building a comprehensive timeline of our overlapping relationships with Mark. She had met him in college, married him 14 years ago. They had built what she had believed was a conventional, if somewhat disrupted, life together, his frequent business travel the only unusual element in an otherwise traditional family structure. "He was so good with the kids," she said, her composure finally breaking as she showed me photos of Mark teaching Emma to ride a bike. "So engaged when he was home. I never once suspected this." "He created completely separate lives," I observed. "Not just an affair or a second family, but entire parallel existences with different friends, different habits, even slightly different personalities." This was perhaps the most disturbing revelation from our comparison. Mark was subtly different in each relationship. With Jennifer, he was more traditional, church-going, focused on the children's activities. With me, he was more cosmopolitan, enjoying art films and political discussions. He had calibrated his persona to match what each of us needed and expected, maintaining these distinct versions of himself for years without slipping. As evening approached, we formulated a plan. Mark was scheduled to return to Boston the following day, supposedly from Minneapolis, actually from Cincinnati. We would confront him together at my house, presenting a united front that would prevent him from manipulating either narrative. "What do you want from this?" I asked Jennifer as she prepared to leave for her hotel. "Beyond the initial confrontation, I mean." She considered the question carefully. "Financial security for my children, legal protection, and honestly, I want to understand how the man I've shared my life with for 14 years could do this. What kind of person is capable of sustaining this level of deception?" I nodded, recognizing my own need for that same impossible understanding. The next morning, we finalized our strategy with Michael present to address legal questions. We positioned ourselves in my living room, the Christmas card placed deliberately on the coffee table between us. When Mark's key turned in the lock at precisely 2 p.m., punctual as always, I experienced a surreal moment of normalcy. The familiar sound of his arrival, his call of, "Honey, I'm home," the routine that had once represented security, now revealed as carefully choreographed theater. The moment he entered the living room and saw Jennifer beside me, Mark froze completely. The briefcase he was carrying slipped from his fingers, hitting the hardwood with a thud that seemed to echo in the silence. His face underwent a remarkable transformation: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, an unsettling calm that suggested he had perhaps always known this moment might come. Rebecca, Jennifer. He acknowledged us both, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. I see you've met. We have, I confirmed, gesturing to the Christmas card, thanks to your carelessness with the holiday mail. Mark's eyes fixed on the card, and something like resignation passed across his features. I was wondering when that would surface. You did this deliberately? Jennifer asked, her voice tight with controlled rage. You wanted us to find out? He sank into the armchair across from us, suddenly looking exhausted. Not consciously, but maybe part of me was tired of maintaining the walls between my lives. What followed was the most extraordinary conversation of my life. A man explaining to his two wives how and why he had systematically deceived them both for nearly a decade. Mark spoke with a detached precision that was almost clinical, detailing the evolution of his dual life as if discussing an interesting case study, rather than the devastation he had caused. It had begun as a temporary solution, he claimed. He had already been married to Jennifer when we met in the Bahamas. The connection between us had been unexpected and powerful, and he had initially intended our relationship to be brief, but he claimed he had fallen in love with me too, unable to give up either relationship. Instead of making the hard choice, I found a way to have both, he explained, as if this were a reasonable response to his dilemma. My job already required travel. It wasn't difficult to create a schedule that allowed me to be fully present in both homes. The more he spoke, the more I recognized a fundamental emptiness behind his articulate explanations. There was regret for being caught, concern about consequences, but no genuine understanding of the emotional devastation he had caused. It was as if he had compartmentalized so completely for so long that he had lost the ability to fully comprehend the human impact of his deception. Did you ever plan to end it? Jennifer asked, her voice steadier than I could have managed. Either relationship? Mark hesitated, perhaps the first authentic reaction in the entire conversation. I told myself I was looking for the right time, the right way. But truthfully, no. The arrangement was working. Working, as if he were describing a business model, rather than the systematic betrayal of two families. When he began to detail the financial structures he had created to support both households, Michael stepped in, explaining that such discussions would now happen through legal channels. Mark nodded, unsurprised by the attorney's presence, another indication of his strange acceptance that this day had perhaps always been inevitable. As the confrontation wound down, I found myself studying this man I had believed was my life partner, searching for some glimpse of the person I thought I had known. Had any of it been real? Any moment of connection genuine? Or had every interaction been calculated, every intimacy a performance? I did love you both, Mark said, as if reading my thoughts. In different ways, but genuinely. That's not love, Jennifer responded, standing to indicate the conversation was over. Love requires truth. What you felt might have been attachment, possession, even care, but without honesty, it wasn't love. As Mark gathered the few belongings he would be permitted to take immediately, supervised by Michael's assistant, I experienced a strange sense of detachment. The anger and betrayal remained, but beneath them was growing recognition that Mark's deception revealed fundamental brokenness within him rather than inadequacy in either Jennifer or me. Whatever psychological anatomy allowed someone to maintain such elaborate compartmentalization, to systematically deceive those closest to him without apparent conflict or remorse, represented a profound emptiness at his core. I had not lost a loving husband. I had discovered a stranger had been occupying that role all along. The weeks following the confrontation passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial forensics, and practical logistics. Mark had left the house without resistance that day, seemingly resigned to the collapse of his dual life. Perhaps maintaining such elaborate deception for so long had exhausted even his capacity for manipulation. Jennifer and I maintained contact throughout this period, our unusual connection evolving from shared trauma to something approaching solidarity. We coordinated our legal responses, ensuring Mark couldn't play us against each other or conceal assets from either proceeding. The legal ramifications were complex. As Michael had predicted, my marriage was indeed invalid, but this gave me grounds for a substantial fraud claim. Jennifer's divorce included considerations for her longer marriage and their children. The private investigator confirmed the Chicago apartment was indeed a transition space rather than evidence of a third relationship. Small comfort, but at least there weren't more unsuspecting women to notify. Financial discovery revealed the full extent of Mark's compartmentalization. Separate bank accounts, credit cards, even retirement plans carefully balanced between his two lives. He had maintained parallel social circles with minimal overlap, separate routines in each city, different breakfast preferences, and evening habits in each home. The psychological discipline required was both impressive and disturbing. Friends reacted with stunned disbelief when I explained the situation. Some questioned how I could have been so thoroughly deceived, implications of naivety that initially stung until I recognized them as attempts to distance themselves from the possibility that such deception could happen to anyone. Others offered unqualified support, creating a safety net of practical help and emotional presence as I navigated this unprecedented territory. 3 months after discovery, the initial legal and financial matters were largely settled. Mark had been surprisingly cooperative, accepting the terms proposed without significant contest. Whether this represented genuine remorse or simply a desire to expedite his exit from an untenable situation remained unclear. I sold the Boston townhouse, unable to continue living in a space so saturated with deception. The process of sorting through possessions became a physical manifestation of separating authentic memories from manufactured ones. Which books had Mark actually enjoyed, and which had he pretended interest in to maintain his Boston persona? Which vacation memories reflected genuine connection, and which were merely performances within his elaborate life management? 6 months after the Christmas card that changed everything, Jennifer invited me to Cincinnati. Her children now knew a simplified version of the truth, that their father had made serious mistakes and hurt people, necessitating the family changes they were experiencing. Meeting them was surreal. These children who might have been stepchildren in some alternate reality where Mark had made different choices. "They're doing better than expected," Jennifer explained as we watched Emma and Liam playing in the backyard. Children are remarkably resilient when given honest explanations appropriate to their age. We had both had limited contact with Mark since the initial confrontation, but Jennifer shared that his visitation with the children had been reduced after he missed several scheduled weekends. He had apparently taken a position in California, creating geographical distance that echoed the emotional estrangement. "Do you ever wonder if he's starting over somewhere?" I asked. "Finding someone new who doesn't know about either of us?" "I've considered it," she admitted, "but I think being exposed changed something fundamental for him. The double life required absolute secrecy to function. Once that was shattered," she shrugged. "At least, that's what I tell myself. It's easier than imagining him doing this to someone else." That evening, sharing wine after the children were asleep, we reflected on the strange bond that had formed between us. 2 women connected by betrayal and its aftermath. "In some ways, I got the better outcome," I observed. "No children to consider, a cleaner break." "But 14 years of my life were built on lies," Jennifer countered. "At least your deception was shorter." We both recognized the futility of comparing our losses. Mark had taken different things from each of us: time, trust, imagined futures. But the core betrayal was the same: the discovery that someone we had loved intimately had never truly been the person we believed them to be. 9 months after discovery, I had rebuilt the external structures of my life. New apartment, focus on career advancement, reconnection with friends I had neglected during my marriage. The internal rebuilding proved more challenging, learning to trust my judgment again, to believe in the possibility of authentic connection, despite having been so thoroughly deceived. Therapy helped, as did the unexpected friendship with Jennifer, which continued through occasional calls and visits. There was something uniquely healing about connecting with the only other person who truly understood the specific bewilderment of discovering your life partner had been systematically living a double life. 1 year after opening that fateful Christmas card, I received a letter from Mark, the first direct communication since our confrontation. It had been forwarded through my lawyer, as he didn't have my new address. The letter expressed what appeared to be genuine remorse, the result of extensive therapy he claimed to be undertaking. He wrote of profound character defects and pathological compartmentalization that had allowed him to maintain his deception without experiencing appropriate guilt. He didn't ask for forgiveness, acknowledging that some betrayals exceed the reasonable limits of forgiveness, but wanted me to know he recognized the full extent of the harm he had caused. I read the letter several times, searching for authenticity in his words. There seemed to be real insight in his recognition that the capacity for such sustained deception reflected fundamental brokenness rather than circumstantial choices. Whether this insight had come too late for him to rebuild a healthy life remained an open question, one that was no longer my concern. I chose not to respond, not from anger, but from recognition that any continuing connection, even the closure of acknowledged harm, would tie me to a chapter I was determined to conclude. Jennifer made the same choice when she received a similar letter. 18 months after discovery, I began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence in my ability to recognize authenticity in others and in myself. The experience with Mark had honed rather than dulled my perception, making me more attuned to the subtle indicators of genuine connection versus performance. 2 years to the day after opening the Christmas card that revealed my husband's double life, I received a holiday card from Jennifer and her children. Inside, she had written, "From one survivor to another, proof that deception reveals the deceiver's character, not our worth. Wishing you joy in your continuing rebuilding." I placed it on my mantle, a reminder that even the most devastating betrayals can lead to unexpected connections and hard-won wisdom. The life I had believed I was living with Mark had been an elaborate fiction, but what I had built since discovering that fiction was authentically mine, a foundation constructed from painful truth rather than comfortable deception. The Christmas card that had shattered my world had also, paradoxically, allowed me to rebuild it with greater integrity than before. There is no gratitude for the betrayal itself, but there can be appreciation for the clarity that follows when comforting illusions are stripped away, revealing both the capacity for human deception and the resilience that follows its discovery. TLDR, a Christmas card mistakenly delivered to my address revealed my husband of 6 years had another wife and 2 children in a different city. He had been maintaining completely separate lives for our entire relationship, traveling between Boston and Cincinnati under the cover of his sales job. His first wife and I confronted him together, discovering the elaborate deception he had maintained for nearly a decade. 2 years later, I've rebuilt my life with greater authenticity and an unexpected friendship with the woman who should have been my enemy, but became my ally in recovery. Edit 1. Many have asked if there were red flags I missed. Looking back, yes, his insistence on handling finances separately, reluctance to be in photos I posted online, and convenient work emergencies that occasionally disrupted plans. But these were so skillfully embedded in legitimate patterns that they never formed a suspicious pattern. That's how sophisticated deception works. Each questionable element has a plausible explanation that only appears suspicious in hindsight. Edit 2. For those wondering about legal consequences, yes, bigamy is technically a crime, but it's rarely prosecuted when handled through civil courts. Both Jennifer and I decided pursuing criminal charges would prolong our entanglement with Mark and potentially impact the children, so we focused on financial remedies instead. The fraud claims resulted in favorable settlements for both of us. Update: 1 year later. Life continues to evolve in unexpected ways. I've settled into my new career path, took a promotion that would have been impossible with Mark's schedule constraints, and have been dating someone for about 6 months now. The most surprising development is that Jennifer and I still maintain regular contact. Her children are thriving despite the upheaval, and she's recently started seeing someone new as well. As for Mark, through mutual connections, we learned he's living alone in California. The investigator we hired confirmed he's not currently maintaining any other secret families, which is something, I suppose. The strangest part of healing has been recognizing that I don't wish him ill. I simply wish him far away from anyone I care about. Sometimes the most complete form of forgiveness is genuine indifference.